Hey everyone, Poindexter here, and we continue our playthrough of the solitaire wargame Western Front Ace. Lieutenant Daladier's last two patrols saw him destroy 2 German scouts, bringing his victory score to 11. He also returned from both patrols without taking any damage, a credit to the effectiveness and power of his SPAD 13. With an expert wingman in tow, Albert is eager to get back into the air. So, let's get started. Albert's next mission will be a recon escort. We'll be escorting reconnaissance aircraft as they perform a mission behind enemy lines. As with bomber escort, we cannot engage enemy two-seaters, only scouts, as they are the primary threat. Albert takes off, and we check for our first encounter. But no encounter takes place. The flight moves into friendly territory, and we check for encounters once again. But no enemy aircraft are spotted. Albert and his wingman cross into no man's land, and we roll for enemy encounters. And German scouts are spotted nearby. We roll a 2 on the German fighters chart, an Albatross D5A, but these scouts arrive in October. Since we're in the month of August, this outcome is invalid, so we must roll again. And Albert encounters a new German scout, the Falls D3, which has just started arriving at the front. The Falls has the same durability as the current Albatross. It also sports the twin guns of the Albatross and good maneuverability, but has a lower top speed, a weakness our SPAD will be able to exploit. Also, the Fals's twin guns are mounted below the cowling, which means they are out of the pilot's reach, and making any jammed gun outcome impossible to clear. And Albert begins combat with the advantage. He fires and potentially destroys the German fighter. The Falls attempts a barrel roll, but it doesn't bypass the outcome, and the German scout is immediately shot down. Albert scores his 12th kill. With his mission requirements met and plenty of ammo to spare, Albert decides to patrol the front lines a little longer. He looks around for more enemy aircraft, but fails to spot any. Albert continues patrolling along the front lines, and finally spots more enemy scouts. The German aircraft are Albatross D3s, and this time combat begins head-on. Albert will use reflexes to shoot first in this round. He fires and lands 3 hits. The starboard struts and controls are hit, with the 3rd hit striking canvas. The Albatross fires back and pulls a destroyed result. However, our 6th sense skill overrides this result, and the outcome is reduced to 2 hits instead. And Albert gets lucky, with both hits striking canvas for no effect. Now we check for final positions in the initiative check. With his controls damaged, the Albatross loses his agility, reducing his total by 2. And the SPAD comes out on top with a 7-point difference, easily placing him on the Albatross's tail. Albert lines up on his prey and fires, and his guns jam, but the weapon's maintenance skill overrides the result, and he scores 5 potential hits. The Albatross performs a barrel roll and avoids 2 of the hits. 2 hits strike a non-existent rear gunner for no effect, but the 3rd strikes the tail, along with a 2nd bonus tail hit. We now determine the final positions, and Albert remains firmly on the Albatross's tail. Albert fires once again, and lands 4 possible hits, plus an extra hit to a crew member. but the Albatross goes evasive and avoids all damage. We determine final positioning, and no change in position occurs. Albert's precision skill has come in handy, as he still has plenty of ammunition left. He fires once again, and potentially scores 5 hits, with a bonus hit to a crew member. The German performs a side loop, improving his position by 1, but we apply the hits before the maneuver takes place. And the Albatross suffers tremendous damage. The forward weapons are destroyed, along with the tail. The fuel tank is leaking, and the pilot takes a light wound. The side loop does nothing for the Albatross. The remains of the German fighter crash in the pockmarked landscape of no man's land. Albert scores his second kill of this patrol. With little fuel remaining, Albert heads back to friendly territory and checks for enemy encounters. But the skies remain clear. Albert is now within sight of the airfield, and we check for our last encounter. But Albert encounters yet another flight of German scouts. The flight consists of Halberstadt D2s, and the encounter begins head-on. Fortunately, our Spad outperforms and outguns the Halberstadt, but we cannot get complacent as we still have a gun pointed at us. Albert will use his advanced maneuver to avoid one hit and gain a position shift over the German scout. The Halberstadt fires and scores 4 hits, but we remove 1 hit due to our Cuban 8 maneuver. The Spad's starboard struts are hit, and Albert receives a serious wound. The Cuban 8 maneuver gives him the advantage over the German, and we now determine final positions. And the Spad's superior performance wins the day, maneuvering on the Halberstadt's tail. In a superior position and with a serious wound, Albert decides to break contact and land at the airfield. First, we check the weather, and the weather is good. We add a +1 modifier to the landing roll due to the serious wound, but Albert makes it on the ground safely. We now check the seriousness of Albert's wounds, and it could have been worse. A bullet grazes his leg, and Albert will not fly the next 3 patrols. We make note of Albert's successful mission in the pilot log. He doesn't fly the last patrol of the month due to his wounds, which has the benefit of reducing his fatigue by 2. Lieutenant Daladier is also awarded a 3rd Bronze Palm for his Croix de Guerre for downing 2 aircraft in 1 patrol. It is now the beginning of a new month, September 1917, and we shuffle the combat cards. The Ypres offensive continues in the British sector, so it won't affect our area of operations. We determine the number of contact patrols we'll be flying, and we are scheduled to fly only 1 patrol this month. But since Albert is an ace, we add +1 to the total, which makes 2 patrols. However, we must use these 2 patrols to fully recover from our serious wound, further reducing our fatigue and giving Albert back his landing skill. This means we now move to the month of October 1917. The Ypres offensive continues. The Isonzo offensive takes place on the Italian front and does not involve the Western powers. Now, we check for the number of combat patrols we'll be flying. And it's going to be another busy month, with a maximum 6 patrols. Albert is now fully recovered and ready to get back in the air. His first patrol of the month will be an offensive patrol, requiring us to fly to enemy territory and back, engaging any aircraft along the way. Albert takes off. and we check for our first encounter. And no enemies are seen. Albert flies to friendly territory and checks again for enemy encounters. But the skies remain clear. Albert and his wingman fly over the front, and they check for sightings of enemy aircraft. And they spot a group of enemy scouts. The fighters are Halberstadt D2s, and combat begins head-on. Albert will use reflexes to shoot first. He fires and only scores 2 hits. One hit strikes canvas, with the other hitting the German's tail. The Halberstadt fires back and scores 4 hits. And the German scout knocks out our forward weapons and hits the port struts. We determine the final positions, and Albert outmaneuvers the German scout with a 5-point difference, shifting 2 positions, and is now on the Halberstadt's tail. With his forward weapons knocked out, Albert decides to break contact and fly away. Albert heads back to the airfield, entering friendly territory. And we check for enemy encounters. Fortunately, no enemy aircraft are spotted. Albert has the airfield in sight, and we check for our final encounter. And the sky is clear of enemies. Albert begins his landing approach, and we check the weather. And the weather is good. Albert had no serious damage, so it's an automatic safe landing. Albert's SPAD is quickly repaired, and he is ready for the next patrol. We document Albert's latest mission in the pilot log, a success since we did engage in combat. And with these 2 patrols completed, we've reached the end of the video. Unlike the last video, these 2 patrols were quite a challenge for Lieutenant Daladier. He shot down 2 German scouts in 1 patrol for the 3rd time, but was seriously wounded by a 3rd scout near his airfield. The time spent recuperating did drop his fatigue down to manageable levels, which was badly needed. The 6th sense skill also saved Albert from instant death, and it's a skill I recommend every pilot acquire as soon as possible. But the inferior German Halberstadts have become a thorn in Albert's side, always causing critical damage to machine and pilot alike. These Halberstadt pilots seem to be quite the marksmen, and we should probably be grateful they aren't flying an Albatross, or the Great War in the air might have a different outcome. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next patrol.